our intention is to try to do these lift tests to validate and fine tune what each channel is delivering with for us, whether it's Google or Meta or TikTok or Snapchat or YouTube.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Power Digital. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 135, and my guest is David Reinke. David started his career in one of the best places to start one's career, Procter & Gamble. From there, he moved on to Harvard Business School and then an industry change from CPG to fashion with Liz Claiborne. He started his own company called Style Hop, which was intended to help brands better identify their winning products to improve margin and sell-throughs. David moved on to full beauty brands, more fashion, but this time in the men's business. This was an opportunity to dig more heavily into performance marketing and the balance of paper and digital marketing. Currently, he's the CEO at GLD, which is a jewelry brand. Like many of us, David has used each one of these roles to build on the foundation that he started at Notre Dame. Great stuff from David, so I hope you'll enjoy the show. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wow Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by David Reinke. David is CEO of GLD, where he's led the company through rapid growth and a major ownership transition. He joined GLD in 2023 after serving as Chief Operating Officer and is focused on building scale in direct-to-consumer, brand partnerships, and operational excellence. Prior to GLD, David held senior leadership roles in consumer brands and retail, bringing a track record of driving growth and team development. He's currently steering GLD's next phase of expansion across wholesale, marketplaces, and international distribution. David, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Mark.
Well, it's nice to see you again and appreciate you taking some time in what is arguably one or two of the busiest weeks of the year. We're recording right before Thanksgiving, so thanks for making the time.
It's a nice break to take your head up from all the analytics and reporting that we're using to monitor, not daily, but hourly in this time frame.
Yeah, I bet. One of the things we do on this show, we start the show exactly the same way. We get the first story from our guest, where you grew up. Maybe there were some things in your background that might have suggested that your career would take the shape that it has.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a small town called Mishawaka, Indiana. It was in the backyard, basically of Notre Dame. So, grew up with the dream of going to Notre Dame and was fortunate enough. They let a few of us locals in. I think it's to keep up relations, but I'll take it. And, and growing up, middle class, focus on service, humility, work ethic, and, being from the Midwest, I think that served me really well in my career. So going to Notre Dame was interesting because he only went 20 minutes away from where I grew up, but it was like going to a different world because Notre Dame's one of those schools that just attracts kids from all over the country. So it was actually a real experience and kind of meeting lots of new people and making my world a lot bigger. And it kind of led me to aspiring to go out in the world and see, what I could accomplish.
Yeah, it's funny. I ask this question, like I said, and you hear so many different stories. In my case, I went the other way. I went from this major, urban metropolitan area in New York City to a small school called Lafayette. In your case, a little bit different. So that's a great story. Notre Dame, great school. I guess you're a big football fan.
Yeah, a huge fan. My youngest son is a sophomore at Notre Dame now, and so I've been able to relive some of my youth, going back and spending time with him and tailgating and doing all the fun stuff that happens at Notre Dame games.
So as you think, back to your 4 years of school at Notre Dame and your first role out of school, how did the schooling, the experience there prepare you for that first role? And then talk about that first role.
Yeah, so I was a marketing major, so where I've landed is pretty straight down the middle. I knew that I was a people person first, so accounting or finance weren't natural fits for me necessarily. And I loved kind of the psychology of marketing and trying to think through consumer insights. And so but I would say the bigger impact from Notre Dame was really all of the leadership experiences I got to have. I was president of my sophomore class, president of my dorm, I was an RA, and they're all, experiences that at a young age it helped me think through how to work together to create a system for people to accomplish more together than they could by themselves. And it's a unique experience to really get a profound experience like that as early as college. And that really influenced a lot of how I think about myself as a leader, how I think about myself as a manager, how I've conducted myself in the workplace. And so, from Notre Dame, I was lucky enough to get recruited to go to Procter and Gamble, which back in the early 90s was one of the top places that you could go if you were a marketing major. I started out in sales and then moved over into brand marketing and worked on the Pert Plus brand, which was a lot of fun. People today might not know that brand. It was big back in the day. It was the first shampoo and conditioner in one. Unfortunately, I joined at a time when there were no real protections around that product positioning. And so we were getting our lunch handed to us by everyone else having their own versions of shampoo and conditioners in one. So I learned a lot about how to build competitive moats and when you don't have one, how difficult that can be.
You talked about, your leadership style. I think back to myself, and I think I've changed, my style a bit over time. What about you? Is there a particular area that you think you've evolved on, matured on, gotten more insight about?
Yeah, I'd say more insight than anything. The older I get, the more I come to believe that we're wired the way we're wired, and the changes that happen are relatively gradual, and perhaps under stress we revert back to the to kind of the mean. But I'd say for me, I've always been a real balance of being very, very driven, but also caring deeply about relationships. And so sometimes those two come into conflict. And I would say that as I have gotten older, I've learned that my ambition usually doesn't serve me well in the moment. It serves me well broadly, but when it comes to working with people, trying to figure out problems, trying to move the business forward, it's usually better to figure out how to pull everyone together versus kind of barreling down, which might have been something I'd be prone to do earlier in my career.
Very insightful, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I hope
That's
I've learned a little bit over all these years.
well, we you and me both, that's for sure. So, your time at P&G was a good sounds like it was a really good foundational experience for you. And from there you went where?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. I will tell you, for me personally, at some point I was like, wow, I was living in Cincinnati, I was married, and I could see the next 30 years out in front of me very, very clearly. It's a very, very clear career path at Procter and Gamble. And because it's such a well-organized, well-run company, there's actually fewer levers to pull. You spend a lot of time really sitting back trying to think, how do we take these huge businesses and grow them 3% or 5%? And so while I learned a ton about foundationally how to be a great brand marketer, I wasn't excited. There wasn't quite enough there for me. But I was really stuck because I was I'd come out of Notre Dame undergrad. I'd been lucky enough to get into brand marketing, and I was surrounded by all these MBAs from all these prestigious schools. And I said, gosh, I don't think I want to do CPG anymore. So I made this is kind of a funny story. I had a lot of moxie back then. I couldn't talk to my direct management about this, but I was thinking about going back to business school. And so I said, and I got I got accepted to Harvard Business School. And I said, gosh, should I go or should I stay and walk away from P&G, which people would, die to have this job. So I made an appointment with the CEO at P&G, A.G. Lafley at the time. He took the meeting. I don't know why he took the meeting. I made it with him because I knew he had gone to Harvard Business School. And I just told him, I said, listen, I haven't told anyone this, but I got accepted. And I'm really struggling. Do I stay or do I go? And he leaned in and he goes, go. And so that's what happened. I went off to business school, had an amazing experience. And a lot of people say that business schools really, they don't learn a lot of business school. I learned a ton. I read over 500 cases. You sit in a classroom and spend a lot of time with other people, kind of throwing yourself into a case and imagining, and it gave me a lot of muscle memory without the experience to, I think, confront business situations. And through that process, I realized I needed a messier environment. So I went from kind of the pristine operating environment of consumer packaged goods at Procter and Gamble to apparel, which is as messy as it gets. A lot of creative types. But I kind of landed in a good spot. I went to Liz Claiborne, which at the time was kind of a conglomerate wholesale apparel company that was fashioning itself like the P&G of apparel. The CEO at the time was an ex-P&Ger. So he gave me one of these jobs that kind of don't really exist anymore, where he let me come in and rotate around different functional roles throughout the company. And that was just an amazing experience that kind of set me up for a career in soft lines.
Was there a concern that you didn't have softline experience when you were coming in?
Absolutely. And in fact, it was a pretty big, looking back, I don't know if I realized at the time that I was taking a pretty divergent path from most of my classmates. Most of my classmates in business school go into consulting, finance, private equity, the kind of the usual suspects. And I was one of just a handful who went into apparel. And it was a very difficult job search because they said, well, have you done merchandising before? No. Have you done sourcing before? No. Well, I haven't done any of these things that are the traditional things. So I really needed someone to take a chance on me and take the bet that someone who was more of a marketing generalist could be helpful at some point. And, the bet I was making in retrospect was that marketing was going to increasingly play a bigger and bigger role in apparel, which I think has proved out to be true. I think used to be much more design driven, more product driven. Not that product isn't important, but I think marketing has continued to become kind of front and center, the driver of most apparel businesses today.
Yeah, it's funny, and we'll talk about where we met, but I've been in apparel most of my career, and it was always interesting. The companies had a very strict path, one or the other. It was either a marketing, finance, analytics driven organization, or it was product and creative driven organization. And I, like you, felt that, look, it's all about the product. If you don't have good product, nothing I'm going to do is really going to change the trajectory of the business. But you still need the support and the drive of marketing and analytics. And, I think we see that now a lot as the web has become, more prominent, everything is analytical. You and I were chatting at the beginning of this call about some of the players we need to rely on to drive our business. And, you could be coming at it from a product perspective, but you need to know the math.
Yeah, you need to know the math, and it's become increasingly complex to be a great marketer because there's all these pipes and connections and levers and dials that can have a profound impact on the business. And if you don't have a deep enough understanding of how all of those connections and dials work, it becomes very difficult to be successful.
How do you surround yourself, as somebody who's CEO of a large business, and we'll get to that in a bit. How do you make sure you surround yourself with the right people?
Listen, it's hard, and I'll tell you, I've had to hire a lot of people, and the more I do it, the more I've just had to come to the conclusion that we're gonna make mistakes in hiring. We're not always gonna hire the best people. It's really hard to get it right. It's really hard to find people who are going to be a good fit. But what I will tell you is that curiosity is the one that wins generally. If I can find somebody who is really, really curious and wants to understand how things work, they tend to be the ones who are successful. And it's really not everybody naturally is curious. Some people have the discipline to do it, and even if they're not naturally, but you need to either be really disciplined about digging in and being curious, or just naturally be unsatisfied unless you understand how everything works in today's world. I think you cannot have a surface level understanding and be successful in today's environment.
We end this show usually with the phrase, the devil is in the details. And somebody dubbed that on me many moons ago when I guess they kind of got tired of answering all of the questions that my curiosity was prompting. But, I fully agree. Certainly you can get buried in the details, but you really need to understand, especially now, with all the levers you're talking about, you need to understand the details. So I'm with you. Good stay at Liz. How long were you at Liz?
I was there almost 6 years. It was good. It was a good path. I didn't love wholesale. When you're in a wholesale environment, you're very sales driven. So contrasting that with Procter and Gamble, I was very aware that we were optimizing for the Macy's and the Belks and the Dillards of the world versus optimizing for the consumer. And I felt that rub, and I thought, for me personally, even though I only spent 5+ years at P&G, it did kind of foundationally make me who I am and how I think about business. And so I needed to push myself back into a direct-to-consumer mindset. And so I left Liz and started my own company. I actually had this idea. It was called Style Hop, and it was essentially an early hot or not crowdsourced assortment tool. So we would basically we built a game online where we would show pre-production samples of our clients' assortment before they produced it. And we would go back to, say, an Ann Taylor or a Talbot's and say, you thought this was going to be your number one dress, and this was going to be your two and three and four, and you were going to buy your inventory that way. Actually, it's this other way. And so the goal was to try to help reduce markdowns and the mismatch between supply and demand. Because essentially in 2006, when I started Style Hop, people were using intuition almost exclusively, past selling too, but not a lot of forward-looking data, if any, to decide how to make their inventory decisions. And that cost the fashion industry a ton of money. So thought I had solved a great problem, had a great experience, started the business right into the Great Recession, learned a lot about risk management. The business absolutely failed. I completely underestimated how threatening this tool would be to the merchants who are the kings within most of these fashion companies, and would feel very threatened to know that someone was trying to take a big piece of kind of their accountability away. Really, really came out of that. Put a lot of my own money and my family's, what little we had saved at that point in my career into it, and really learned a lot about how to be a very strong risk manager coming out of that. I tend to be very optimistically biased, which served me really well in a lot of cases, but in risk management, it's really good to think about the downsides and around the corners. And I have learned to be much better at that, to rely on other folks to ask the next question. And that was the biggest insight I think I took away from Style Hop.
I'm smiling as you're talking about the merchants and kind of, choosing product. When I got my start in the catalog business, it was an early stage catalog business. We were selling, unisex apparel. And, we used to try to be forecast. They were going to put 100 products in the line, and we'd sit down with the designers and we would say, okay, I want you to rank them 1 to 100, 1 being your best item, 2 being 100 being your worst. And I want you to assign an index to them. They were good people, they were smart people. They literally could not do that because in their mind every single item was going to be a good item,
Yes.
right? And I'm like, I'm not saying that the 100th item is bad, right? All I'm saying to you is tell me the array. They couldn't do it, and I've seen that kind of a thing, multiple times in my career. So I hear you. Today's episode is brought to you by Power Digital, the growth partner for brands that refuse to settle. At the intersection of marketing, consulting, and data intelligence, Power Digital is where brands go to ignite revenue and scale fast. Their proprietary technology, Nova, transforms first party data into clear, actionable insights, fueling smarter strategies, better investment decisions, and measurable growth. Power Digital's team of data scientists, creatives, and growth strategists challenge outdated marketing playbooks, delivering results that matter. If you're ready for an agency to turn your data into a competitive advantage, visit powerdigitalmarketing.com. You become founder. You realize that you have a good idea, maybe too early for its time. So you go and you get a new gig and you wind up at Full Beauty Brands.
That's right. And Full Beauty was, spent 12 years there. For folks who, don't know Full Beauty, it's been through a number of incarnations. When I joined, it was French owned by Kering. It was called Red Cats. They had a great idea. They were also too early, like me. They were too early. They had this idea that they could roll up all these catalog companies from all over the world, these old school catalog businesses, and turn them into e-com businesses. And they just over accelerated out of print and into digital too quickly and didn't understand the product mix piece. Fortunately, my boss, Stephanie Sobel, who I learned a ton from while I was at Full Beauty, she was there for I think the first maybe 8 years I was there. She resisted mightily during the ownership by the French and kind of made sure that we didn't walk away too quickly from the print that had served us so well. So she had the pace right in terms of introducing digital spend and balancing that with the historically productive print spend. But I really found a dream job. I was brought in to run the men's business, which was a plus size men's big and tall business called King Size. It had been declining a little bit each year. I was kind of brought in to bring new energy. I had never run a merchant org before. But what was great about it, because it was historically a catalog business, it was very marketing driven. The way you communicate with consumers and direct consumer business where you don't have stores is you have to put a catalog together that entices people to buy. So I got to, while I was learning product, which I had to learn because I was leading all these merchants, I got to lean on my marketing to kind of buy me some time. And that's what I did. I basically did a creative revamp, reshot everything, rebranded it with just some kind of, I would say, fine tuning of the imagery, and that helped create some, nice tailwind in the business, and it gave me a little bit of time to learn how to build product assortments.
Yeah, so we that's where we met. I had been there years before you when it was Brylane, and then became French owned, as you refer to, and then we changed the name to Red Cats. Stephanie and I worked together as well, during that time. So really great person and a strong marketer and merchant. So you mentioned one of the topics that's near and dear to me, this issue of paper versus digital. We've kind of seen the pendulum, go from everybody thinking, geez, we're going to get rid of paper. We're going to go all digital. Some businesses succeeding in reducing their reliance. But now you see a lot of businesses that were digitally started, had no other source of marketing, and now finding a way to add paper into the mix. What's been your experience there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, one of the first things I did in my current role is introduce print into the marketing mix, and we have a customer who's very young, 18 to probably 30, and so not a traditional candidate for print. People say, oh, it's for older people, but my own thinking on marketing mix is pretty simplistic. It's, where's your next best marginal dollar spent? And usually your first marginal dollar spent in print is going to be productive. Maybe not your millionth or 10 millionth dollar, but there's some amount of dollars that probably a brand can support print that's going to be productive. And there's probably some amount of digital spend that has tipped over into non-productivity or being, and so when I come into a business like the one I'm running now that spend 100% of its dollars in digital, it's very easy to say, hey, could we look at radio? Could we look at print? Could we look at TV? Are we at a scale where those things could make sense? And how can we test our way into success there? And how could those channels complement the things that we're doing digitally?
All right, so maybe we should go backwards. I didn't give you a chance. So GLD, tell everybody what kind of a business GLD is.
Yeah, so GLD is a 14-year-old founder-driven men's jewelry brand that caters to young men and leverages the culture, whether it's hip hop, rap, sports, things that guys are interested in to kind of create brand resonance and emotional storytelling. And Christian Johnston, who is the founder and who's my partner in crime, started it out of his dorm room his senior year of college. He was looking for jewelry that he liked, but that was affordable and was high quality. He couldn't find anything. He either found $15 chains that were cheap, would turn your neck green and break quickly, or items that cost thousands of dollars. He just had so much conviction that there was a sweet spot that he went and learned everything he could about jewelry. He went and built a product line that sold out of a box, the first run that he made, and it grew from there. I came on about 3 years ago to help with the continued growth and scaling. It's now private equity backed, and I've just had a an absolute ball working with this young man. He's just got so much talent and he created something so special. And my job is really, he's really the leader in thinking around the corners and he's the heart and soul of the brand. My job is kind of just to build the road in front of the the car that's running down the path so that we can, we don't have any hiccups and we can keep moving fast and we can keep growing.
How do you balance, I've seen the site, I've talked about the business a bit. How do you balance the, let's call it the top of funnel brand awareness and getting the name out with the fact that you need to be responsible to make sure that your marketing dollars, as you mentioned before, are being measured and are efficient. And sometimes brand awareness spend is really hard to understand whether you're getting value or not.
Yeah, gosh, it's the $1 million question, right? It's the question that I think all of us marketers are asking all the time right now. There's a lot of people that chatter from all sides on this topic, and the noise can make it can almost paralyze you. I don't have a perfect answer on it because you're right. The brand investments that we make are inherently less measurable than the lower in the funnel direct response actions that we do. But what we have done is we've invested in data science. We have a data scientist who's on staff. We have a director of data science. We I would say, invest much more in data science than other companies our size because we believe that even though the top of funnel and the awareness building and brand building is super hard to measure, you have to try and figure that out and try to understand that relationship between those investments you make to generate awareness and the investments that you need make to kind of capture demand. And so we have not, I wouldn't say unlocked it perfectly, but we believe deep in our guts that it's our brand efforts that are actually what drive the bus, and that the spend that we do at the bottom of the funnel is really just scooping up and capturing that demand.
You talked about, the product that you sell and the inspiration. What kind of a role do collaborations, with, folks like artists and athletes and other influencers play in the marketing mix?
Yeah, so it's not a huge, the vast majority of our spend is in performance marketing, traditional performance marketing, think Meta, TikTok, Google. That's where, all that demand capture. However, arguably the most efficient and most important spend is in these collaborations, in the more top of funnel activities. We don't spend nearly as much money there, but we get so much more reach. And we know today that only about 12% of our target consumer has ever heard of GLD. And so the math is pretty easy. We're about $150 million business. And so if we can take that 12% and take it to 20% and 30% and 40%, we know that when we are able to tell our story, that it's a compelling story that resonates with our target. And so it has to be a part of the mix because if we're not generating and driving awareness, it's really hard to grow. It's really hard to capture people further down in the funnel.
Is there an Amazon component of your business?
Yeah, recently there is. In the last few years, we've grown Amazon. I do not think that Amazon takes away from the experience for consumers. I think many people prefer, I think of it as a transaction channel. People can be really compelled by GLD and still prefer to buy on Amazon where they've paid for a Prime membership, we're happy to support that experience. We think we have a better experience through our website, but it's consumers' call where they want to buy us.
Let's go back to measurement for a second. You talked about data scientists, and that's an important role. Oftentimes, maybe brands your size don't have that in house. They leverage it from, external parties. Do you work with any type of media mix modeling, or you're handling that all in house?
Yeah, we do use some third-party tools, but we have a multi-touch attribution model. We primarily inform that with geographic holdout lift tests, where we hold out parts of our marketing in geography so that we can then fine-tune that multi-touch attribution model based on those holdouts so that we can correlate the exact lift that a particular marketing effort is giving us. And then we fine-tune the attribution model based on that. And then we use an MMM less frequently, but to give us some insight around particularly areas that are a little harder to measure, that maybe the investments aren't quite as big, to try to get some understanding of what role they might be playing in the mix.
And once you have your data, is, for those that might not be as forward thinking on this as you seem to be, how often are you changing the mix based upon the data that you find?
Our intention is to try to do these lift tests to validate and fine tune what each channel is delivering with it for us, whether it's Google or Meta or TikTok or Snapchat or YouTube. We want to do testing twice a year to continue validating because they're changing their algorithms all the time. And we want to validate how much incrementality are we really getting from the investments that we're making in each channel. Hard to do that because one, you're taking away some business when you do that. And you also have to have enough spend into each of these channels to actually get a read and get clarity. And so in addition to that, we're also then dabbling, whether it's print, whether it's smaller platforms, putting dollars in there, and those become harder to measure the real impact. But we know that, again, with the concept that I shared before, that that first dollar spent should be the most efficient if you're doing it well. There's reason to be trying to test into as many channels as possible to expand awareness, demand capture, et cetera.
How aggressive have you guys been in playing around with AI and integrating it into your business?
Not as aggressive. We very clearly, all of our teams or individuals are using it individually to enhance their own personal productivity. I think that's probably happening almost everywhere today. I'd say that we have been slower to integrate AI directly into our business. We're doing it a little bit on the customer service side. We're dabbling with it on the creative side, but very slowly because we believe we have real competitive advantage with our creative process. That said, the most important thing that I think we're doing is we're unifying our data into a single data set. So think of all transaction data, all consumer data, all product data in one house, so that when the time comes when we might ingest and have our own kind of internal ChatGPT, we'll have a single data source that it can pull from to generate insights and help drive our business. So, and that is not a small activity because the cleaning of the data to make sure, you can throw a bunch of data into a database, but to make that data really be strong and be directionally accurate actually takes a lot of work. And that's where our data scientist spends a lot of his time, is helping get that set up right.
So I mentioned at the top of the show, we're recording this right before Thanksgiving. So what does your crystal ball say about this holiday season for your business and retail in general, Dave?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. There's a ton of mixed signals out there, on November 24th on what's happening. Walmart just announced some really good results. Target announced terrible results. Gap announced good results. We saw a little dip in our business in the last few weeks. We've seen that before leading up to Black Friday. There's sometimes a pause that happens. Every year can't be perfectly correlated to the prior year. That said, we don't necessarily believe there's this huge macro softness out there, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what's going to happen. We do an enormous amount of our demand and significantly more of our profits in the next 45 days. And so we're always super nervous coming into this time frame. regardless of how well prepared we are.
Yeah, you and every retailer that I've ever worked for. So, anyway, good stuff. You've had an amazing career, and you've been a very gracious friend. I really appreciate conversations that we've had and you doing the show. We're down to the end. We do this 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1-word answer. Are you ready, David?
Jared, do it.
All right. A brand that you admire or that inspires you.
I have to say it, Notre Dame. I mean, when you think about how competitive colleges are, Notre Dame has figured out a way to make community and values like clear differentiators in its brand, and it makes it a really special place too.
Okay. Favorite app on your phone?
Would have to go with Strava, like my love of data and my love of community combined, and it keeps me healthy, so I like it.
Last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
I started my search for these glasses on Oliver Peoples. I've been pretty loyal to Warby Parker, but I felt like I just needed a little bit more of design push, and so upped my game a little bit and went to Oliver Peoples.
Okay, there you go. Something that you're not good at, but wish that you were.
Both my sons are really good at languages and speak Spanish fluently. My younger son's learning Italian, just English over here, unfortunately. Really sad.
A charitable organization that you're passionate about.
So my roommate from college lost his oldest son to a brain tumor, and so we really like to support the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation.
Okay. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
The one I would really love to kind of keep developing is seeing the best in people. I find that when I'm able to do that, it tends to lead to the best results, both personally and professionally.
Other than family, what's your most prized possession?
That's a tough one. So I'm kind of maybe gonna tie in family. The house, I'm in my home office right now, and we bought this old house in 2005. So it's over 20 years now, and it's the house that I've lived in the longest in my life by far, and raised my children and family here. So this is definitely our home.
There you go. That's nice. Where can people reach out to you on social media, David, if they're interested?
LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I find it's a great resource, both inbound and outbound.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. I wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving. Good luck to the business GLD, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Mark, it was a real pleasure. Thanks so much.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to David Reinke for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, David shared his leadership evolution, noting that while he remains driven, he's learned to prioritize relationship building over ambition when working with people. Being a good collaborator might be one of the most important attributes of having a successful career. And number 2, curiosity and a deep understanding of the details are crucial for success in today's complex business environment. I learned very early on in my career that there's nothing wrong with asking questions and being curious. It helped me learn, and it helped the people that were explaining the answers to me as well. And number 3, data science is king. David mentioned that they've invested heavily in data science as a means of helping measure performance of the business, their paid media spend, and their overall marketing mix. He also spoke about how they're working to get all the data into one clean environment from which to build analysis and perhaps leverage artificial intelligence to execute. But you need to have clean data, so spend the time up front in getting this right. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.